It never ceases to amaze me how low the bar I set is always too high for the general citizenry. One would assume that living in the information age, where you possess a device that can fit in the palm of your hand, but that device can give you more access and more information than 1 million heavy Britannica encyclopedias. And since most of us are on these devices hours a day, we would have the inclination to do our due diligence in researching whatever particular topic it is before we run our mouths about it. But I keep finding myself going through this very weird cycle. I will comment on a post, or I will say genuinely that every day having witnesses, hearings, subpoenas is a waste of time. Not only for the taxpayers who are paying for all this bullshit, but the legislative branch who is not legislating laws to help the people, the witnesses themselves, and everyone involved in all of this circus. When I point that out, someone responds with this every time. This has happened to me 5 or 6 times. It's not a waste of time because Nadler and Schiff are working to uphold the Constitution. When I hear that, I always reply with, are you saying that you care about this because you care about the Constitution? And when they say correct, I want to make sure I ask them that, because when you claim you care about something, then you should know about that particular topic, right? When I get the default response of yeah, and then I get into the specifics of the Constitution, they don't know about it, they get angry, I respond back with, but I thought you said you cared about the Constitution. And if you care about something, shouldn't you at least know the basics of the thing that you care about? The specifics I get into are the abnormalities that we have been facing recently. The first is Robert Mueller. And what I mean by that is, typically people who support these bullshit impeachment inquiries are the same ones who supported Robert Mueller in his Russia hoax. So the question is, was Robert Mueller an inferior officer or a superior officer? If you want to say he was an inferior officer, that inferior officer had the right to subpoena a sitting president and anyone he pleased. And if that's the case, then that means any attorney general from any district has the power and authority to subpoena anyone they please for whatever reason. But if you want to say no, he was a superior officer, he was never confirmed by the Senate. And according to the Appointments Clause of the Constitution, the superior officers have to be appointed. But instead, he was appointed by Rod Rosenstein. Rosenstein, whatever that freak's name was, that bureaucrat, that piece of shit, I don't even know how to pronounce it, and he's not important enough. But you get the point. What about due process, the Fifth Amendment? You see, one of the things was that the colonists were not able to face their accusers who were in Parliament when they were accused. The Fifth Amendment gives you due process and innocence until proven guilty. That is how English common law worked. Sir William Blackstone, one of the philosophers of the Constitution, who they based it upon, wrote about common law. And common law, which is the foundation of our Constitution, is based upon the right to face your accuser and innocence until proven guilty. What about history being a precedent? If you study the Johnson impeachment, the Nixon impeachment, the Bill Clinton impeachment, each of them were able to call their own witnesses, able to have their lawyers present, and able to testify under oath. This is not a normal impeachment proceeding. And the question is, what specifically are they trying to impeach this president for? According to the Constitution, it has to be bribery, treason, high crime, or misdemeanor. So one of the things they're trying to get him for is witness intimidation. Where is that in the Constitution? But the premise they're basing this off is he was insulting a witness on Twitter while that person was testifying, which would go against the First Amendment, that is the freedom of speech. Abuse of power is not in the Constitution. And if the president setting foreign policy is an abuse of power, then you're saying that we don't have separate branches of government. It is the executive branch's duty to set foreign policy. The only time Congress gets involved is when you want war or if you have a treaty. Obama didn't do that, by the way. The Iran deal was a treaty. It was never ratified by the Senate. But again, these people don't really care about the Constitution. They're just dumbasses that regurgitate that because they have nothing better to say. But since we have separate branches of government, it is not Congress's job to tell the president how to set foreign policy. If Trump does not want to send Ukraine money for any reason, then that is his prerogative as the president. The question is intent. Is the reason he did not give Ukraine money because he wanted Joe Biden to be investigated or because he was trying to root out corruption? You can never get to intent. That is difficult. In a court of law, if you can't prove intent, it is innocence until proven guilty. But this is not even based upon first-hand information. I heard a guy who heard a guy who heard a guy that said there was a quid pro quo. But the president and even the president of Ukraine have stated extensively that there was no quid pro quo. And how can there be a quid pro quo when one side doesn't receive anything? The definition of a quid pro quo is something for something. Ukraine has their money, and Trump never had an investigation started. But again, imagine going into a court of law, being called into court and said, Johnny heard from Mary, who heard from Mark, that you said this on your private phone call. Imagine that. We're not going to give you the right to face your accuser. You're guilty before you're proven innocent. That would go against all of your constitutional rights, correct? One of my stipulations before I speak on a topic and contextualize what I think is that I do basic research, my due diligence. I'm not a constitutional lawyer. I don't have a college degree. I was a mediocre student, but I have the same access to information that you have. The Constitution is publicly available. You can read it. You can go to the library and get a book that tells you about the founders, the principles, the philosophies. This is not difficult. And I love too when I say, I bet all of you people are reading John Calvin's Depravity of Man, right? Or Sir William Blackstone's Common Law. Or you're reading John Locke's Treatise of Government, and they're like, what does this have to do with anything? Well, this is what the Constitution is based upon, right? and you claim to love this so much. And it's crazy, but the USMCA could really help people. Our main trade partner is Canada, believe it or not, and Mexico. We do more trade with Canada and Mexico than we do China, but we're China's #1 trade partner. But instead of passing a trade deal, which will make our trade partners buy more of our goods, helping create more jobs, the USMCA is sitting on the desk right now of Nancy Pelosi. Everyday subpoenas, witnesses, testimonies that are not helping us. And if you claim to care about the Constitution and you don't know anything about the Constitution, you can go fuck yourself, because you're a dumb fuck that doesn't know anything.